All right. Oops. It's not very loud, but it's okay. Okay, good morning. Let's start with making a mandala offering, and then Geshe will lead the way with refuge and bodhicitta. Sashi Poki Juchi Meto Tamri Rablingshi Nidegyen Padi Sangye Shindu Mikte Owa Idoku Namda Shin La Chu Pa Shoidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kaliya Kaya Chonan Soge Jonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kamsuchi Dagi Chushegi Betsonangi Dola Benchi Sange Ropa Sho Chonan Soge Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kamsuchi Dagi Chushegi Betsonangi Dola Benchi Sange Ropa Sho Chonan Soge Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyasuchi Dagi Chushegi Betsonai Dola Penche Sange Ropa Sho. Let's say somebody. All right, so we have been looking at a text that is called Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun. Currently, we're looking at an explanation of meditation that is called Giving and Taking, or Tonglen meditation for increasing loving kindness and compassion. So in the previous sessions, we've covered a section that explains how to meditate on giving. And today we're going to pick up on the meditation on compassion. The most important feature of the Buddhist tradition, of the Buddha Dharma, is compassion, which is the root of bodhicitta. So compassion, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, and also the development of wisdom that realizes selflessness. So here, as we're looking at the meditation on compassion, for us, it becomes of the most important thing that we seek to develop. Can the patient? Is it too loud? All right, so we can fix it. Just a second.
Yeah. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello, hello. Listen. Maybe. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. The patient ticket was. Hello, 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 hello. Long deshan.
Gorme.
I'll go, Mark.
Okay. I can hug the fan.
Tadrida, the ninja kitchen with ninja gomgore, ninja angula, Kegore, son, the Teneda, Altambo ninja comhiela, ninja gon karim, but the that she had the kitchen was sure was.
Anyway, sorry for that. So we here we're going to look at the meditation on compassion. So we said that compassion is so important. We need to generate compassion in our mind stream. And therefore, it's important really to identify what compassion is, what the nature of compassion is.
There's the ninja diris lawn dige. Tangan Tara Mamud Roji Machi Ranchichiro. The Rakpats on Shabana, Ninji said it's Zewateres. Zewateres, the Dilavina, the Ninji, won some 10 roras. That's our Kandachiri Lavana. Zewa Kandachiri, Nandu Namgu, Nandukulia, Zewa Chori Wajundo, Tirang Reve, or deleting subjects, no? Deleting subject, Delegatchech, Namgu Chori Wadi, Chapa than Redia Mato. Only gauge Piggy Muyu needs to some Tony, and it's our chance to the Chaggy Yomares.
So we need to identify what the nature is of compassion. And as such, compassion has different subtleties. There are coarse levels and subtle levels. So for example, a coarse level of compassion would be the sense of love or care, which means that simply looking at a really coarse level or nature of compassion would be a sense of care for others. But if you wonder what kind of love or what kind of care are we speaking about? Well, currently we have a partial sense of love for others. We want to develop compassion that is deeper than that, more profound, more deeper than that. Currently, a sense of love for others is partial in a sense that it is mixed up with attachment. And as it is mixed up with attachment, it does not become compassion or a sense of care for others, which are based on reality.
Teresa, when the chapa the ninja gom, the ninja gombara, ninja zewa, tintigre samba, di tintigamundas, Kansana, di ko chapa the dreva inza, chapa inza, chokchila chapa di, any compel tamana, chok shenla dawan di, ranjing periyungo. Diona chakdan kiech, and nyokta yongdeyachi ro gamaga to samlo yongyalo soba to samlo ta chagdang to ne legi yobanza and din digumandus da chi te mayimbi ta ninji gonggo duslandi ta de mayimbi ninji gomdan di ninji khandajle ninji kigres o din digi ta ani samlo tang gogu yosares.
So currently a sense of love and compassion are mixed up with attachment. They're mixed with attachment. And therefore, when we look at, you could say, partial or one-sided compassion or love that we develop, the stronger they are, also the more aggression or anger we have to others, which are not included in a sense of compassion or loving care. So that's what happens when we have love and compassion, which are mixed with attachment, right? If you focus on just a selected group of beings, then you'll also have a sense of like and dislike to others. So this is not the type of love and compassion that we seek to develop. So then a question arises, how then do we develop compassion or a sense of care for others which are impartial?
다직 탐질의 개비 ninjisla운디다 탐질의 개비 ninji 카레스나 다 탐지 아니 동안다 타는 삼비기 제와데 레슬라바나 티야 베팅 sab슈티가나 단 조금도스 탐지 동안다 타는 제마로 냠고 가스나 만주 탐지기 대원 되고요 동안 되고요 말은 한참 지규레슬라운디 티 지당 디 차고거든요 대sam기 samlo 대sam기 아니 ninji디 슈크체무지 끼에 두고를 했으나
So then we want to develop compassion to all sentient beings. So what kind of compassion would it be? Compassion that wishes other sentient beings to be free from suffering, that sense of care or love for others, in thinking, may all of them be free from suffering, as all of us as living beings are equal in terms of seeking happiness and well-being and wanting to be free from suffering. So if we think that compassion is just a wish for others to be free from suffering, for everyone to be free from suffering, and training in that thought, may everyone be free from suffering, it's not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough. At least Geshe says that for him on a personal level, if he thinks of compassion just in terms of that basic wish, may everyone be free from suffering, it's not strong enough to really encourage the development of to develop that sense of compassion that we want to develop.
로드 슈크체그레스 아니 동아다 비기 동아다 타와 치비기 타블라야 죽투야지 탑된 투야지 인거자 동아 끝날 수도 심비토니다 동안다 때는 찌마로 냠비기다 닌지디다 sabshuso로 차고레스.
So it's not enough just to think, may all living beings be free from suffering. If you really want to have that genuine wish for everyone to be free from suffering, we need to understand the way that sentient beings are tormented by suffering. To really understand how sentient beings are beset by suffering. And if we understand that deeply, then this wish will arise in our mind to find the methods, the ways to free other sentient beings from suffering. And this is the type of compassion that we want to develop.
동할 기타 직심제남 동할 나르츠셰온디 동할 기타와디 몽바 마리바임 바치 송요레스 라 땅인 툼닌 직된라 인지군도 끼니수스 따왕님바 비 따지 마리발라 소비기 왕기 아니 차당강기 랭여바사 디왕기 다 동안 존데 딘디식 샤다 차고레스 이제 데드 트는지 모르냐바 딜이야 인지고레스 라운디기 답이 동알기 규 아니 군중기 토네 동아 용구여바 아니 대다 찬도 로지발이야 군중 고고야 딩 고발이야 비기 다 동반이 또비기 엔드 로지고야 저 텔레데니다 군중 고빈 고봉 온도 치주 다 간지 뎀바시기 림발이야 닌지양 타바 기발이야 뎀바시기 네술 치마치진 심바디 베 마스바 케쳔보 디 나니 비기다지 고비 뎀비기 다지 균 타도바 람지 뎀바 동반이 온손 또비 이시세디 동반이 온손 또비 이시 조디 동반이 세디 로 텐종기 최디 텐종기 최디다 아니 텐종기 최디를 같이 고삽 부여바 디 저기 아니 닌지디 사브르 조고서리스 간진 남산지 위치조 님보디 닌지다 아니 동반이 또비 셔럽 손직 돈 드레드 어딘디지 돈 삼단다 닌지레 베바이나 아니 닌지랑귤이야 더 두고서라스
Can I try to sing the Omajukpa?
오만주버려
So then in understanding the way that sentient beings are tormented by suffering, we want to develop the understanding of how different types of suffering that we experience as sentient beings arise from ignorance, from a sense of confusion. Just like an Indian master called Chandakirti described in this supplement to the Middle Way, the process by which sentient beings cycle again and again in the cycle of existence through conceiving of themselves with a view of the self, the other afflictive states of mind arise that cause them to perform negative actions, which result in suffering, different types of suffering in cyclic existence, and understanding that mechanism by which from ignorance, particularly ignorance with respect to the self, we end up behaving negatively and then experiencing suffering. We develop on that basis the wish for others to be free from suffering. May they be free from suffering. Which means that in order to develop that sufficient sense of compassion or the right sense of compassion, we need to then understand the mechanism by which suffering arises because of true origins. True origins being origins which are actions and afflictive states of mind. And that also that it is possible to put a stop to these origins through manifesting true paths in the mind stream, true paths which are a type of wisdom that realizes selflessness, that brings about the cessation of suffering and its causes, which means that it is important to understand the four truths in order to develop the right sense of compassion. It is imperative actually to develop an understanding of the four truths in order to be able to put a stop to suffering. So we've mentioned that true cessations, which are enacted by true paths, would bring about the cessation of suffering and the cause of suffering. And the true paths that we speak about are true paths which are in the nature of an exalted wisdom, exalted knowledge that perceptually realizes selflessness. Which means that in short, wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness, understanding how dependently arisen phenomena are empty by nature. So the deeper your understanding becomes, the more profound your understanding becomes of how phenomena are empty or are selfless, the greater your compassion becomes. So in short, here we're looking at the part of meditation for developing wisdom. But what we want to develop is wisdom. Sorry, we're looking at this part of meditation for developing compassion. So what we want to develop is wisdom and compassion. On that basis, we can give rise to this authentic or right sense of compassion.
그래서 변하다 대종기 대종 topic tawa senamdu tombani topic tawa digi ninji khandasan jengre sedi ro ninji khandasan jengre sedi di kechembo ro ta kansna tenjong ki nelu samondi tenjong ki nelu samondi yug nguye netsuldi ranchogores nguye netsu ranchondi nguye netsule shinjulo shubigi ani momba digi ani kenjin imba 디왕기 착단 정zul로 소버 디페 아니 가서 다지 melon le deba nanshi ji tong gu yosares tin tong ne ti wang gi ta ani munde bi dongar ani be drup chene nar de gu yob tong di ta chana chi maro nyambi ngosu tong di ta chana chi maro nyambi ta ninji di ani shukche yung gu yosares ro pena nganzu ji simje nyam ta ba be ta ji odinti pe ngoyo gu be ani kanga shuji che de ba ngosu tu ba na ani telya 믹스기 인지기야 된데 연구도 왔어. 딩안주 점 많이 법배나 아니다. 안주 신다체 뭐 방금 파버토믹이 키냠 타버지 야 괜찮니 아니 인지 숙체 뭐 총알 때니 초조비다 남터지 요레스 어디서 때 봐야다 하고도 왔어.
So we mentioned the view of dependent origination, understanding how dependently arisen phenomena exist. So dependent arising is the view or the understanding of how things exist. And the more we understand the view of reality, how phenomena are empty, we can induce a greater level of compassion. So this is an important point. Through thinking of dependently arisen phenomena, we come to understand reality. And through understanding reality, we can then recognize the faults of our own ignorance, of these erroneous states of mind that operate in a mind stream. And when we see the faults in our erroneous way of thinking, it is like having a mirror through which the faults of anger, attachments, and so forth are reflected. We can really see the faults of these afflictive states of mind through the mirror of dependently arisen phenomena. So when we then understand how all these arise because of mistakes with respect to reality, anger, attachment, and so forth arise because of mistakes that we make with respect to reality, and then suffering arises from that, and wish for suffering arise for others. On that basis, we develop compassion to others. The type of compassion that we will generate to others would be greater if we understand the process by which they end up experiencing suffering. It is similar to how we react when we encounter someone that is in a dire situation. So imagine meeting someone that is in a desperate situation, a really pitiful situation, and how the sense of compassion to that being will arise in your mind if you were to meet them directly. It is similar to an account that is found in the life story of an Indian master called Arya Sangha, in which it was said that upon meeting, in that story, it says that upon meeting a sick dog, and a dog that was completely infested by maggots, he developed this great sense of compassion for the dog. And through that, he came to complete the accumulations that were required for him in order to meet his spiritual teacher.
ninji da 개천분은 쇼레스라 쇼다 딩에 다 두스라고 말다스라 뭔가 깨우 담바 줬다 쇼 송여라다 쇼 송여 학도는 단단 안주 무슨 제대하다 지 여러분 지 쯔비다 지 라마 깨우 담바 주 가두이나야 로고지 감보라야 롬년나 아니 특성시 공개 고세 타말려온디 베셰네다 지 ninji chamba modo sonya meba chadedi ta ani nenga di ngusu ani sik nyongwe tru tuk tsewa chimbo di ta tukila chong di teni ani kamyo khadu sona ya ani ninji chamba chanju sem chada sonya gudo asira.
And this is such an important point. All the great masters of the past have emphasized that as well. And also contemporary masters such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the other lamas, other spiritual traditions that we follow, who have spent all of their life in a process of studying, reflection, and meditation. And particularly when you look at those great masters towards the last part of their life, it seems that what they emphasize is solely the development of love and care for others, loving kindness and compassion to others. This is something that they have seen directly. They have developed that on the basis of their own experiential development. For us, emphasize the importance of the development of loving kindness, compassion, and the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta.
Tere susu meze nanglo ya susu meze nanglo ya chi yani ninji shu chenpo chiyo bai na ani sul pi ya tuna ya ninji chiyo bai na chambali gres chamzi yo bai na teni semda nyebu yong ya ani nyogda meba susu samol da sibu segyan ros da chi chamba da ninji la sobe da mandang di teni ani kyen thonde la soba ro ta dindi mangbu yong yo ta nganzu nyong yo thu yo ros ro tinza ninji ni pi tin sabu ji shi kyang ro ma shi kyang ro dindi lo sambu ji kyule kiro chena samsam keba sho sambi molom gyani dus cheba na gyache gyadam ba ani mesedu tyanda demba chago sares.
And we can see the effect of loving kindness and compassion over our life when we generate great compassion to others. Whoever we're going to meet, we're going to feel close to that person. We're going to feel close to them. We will have a sense of care for that person. We'll have no problems or issues with that being if we have that sense of great compassion towards them. Whereas when love and compassion are insufficient, inadequate in our mind stream, we end up seeing faults in others and problems arise. So even if we do not know precisely what loving kindness is or compassion is, still it's good to make this aspiration to develop this kind-hearted mind, a good state of mind, a kind-hearted mind. If we make this aspiration, my mind become kind-hearted, then definitely 100% guarantee that your life will be made meaningful.
ninji kechembu yimbe pe jarya jor tigi soso yimba na pe pendon dosro metsile ya goshe gyane metsige thoma ani parba thami kapson la ya ro chunjung gola ya ji phama la ya tengu bi kaptu ani zewa khaju shu chembu yimba ani ji soso ya susu kambe gan lang tu ba yimba ina ya ani phasu chi ani zewa yongi dindi yoba na metsidi kibu yimba Tama gengo chajene susu kambegala ya lamu tuwa chadia shengi chamzela ya tengowa shengi chamzi tengi yoba na ani kibu yoba de meba na kanga shujin londe ya di o du song di ngone taneria samsung chi tindo asro tinza ani dinza tinti zewa kichimbu somebody an susu gyule ya kiya tabshi chi ani lobjong chewa na da number 1 di tirendo asro number 1 di tireshas.
It's honestly, Dalai Lama has emphasized that so much before. The development of compassion and how, when we look at our entire life, we can see how compassion is so important at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of our life. We begin this life being born to parents, and from the very start, the process of growing up and maturing is dependent upon love. Depend upon that sense of care that is extended to us, without which we will not be able to be happy or to be well in this life. So compassion is present at the beginning of our life, and compassion is also present at the end of our life. When we get old and frail, we might end up not being able to rise up from bed, and we will depend upon others. So if there are other people that you depend upon and they care for you, then there is a sense of well-being or happiness and well-being in being assisted by others. Whereas if you find yourself completely alone, there's no one else to help you out, then it's quite a miserable way to end your life like that. So through that, we can, just when we think of this life, we can understand the importance of love and care for others. And when we understand that, we attempt to give rise to it in a mind stream. We train in the development of love and care for others. And as such, it makes us become authentic or real Buddhist practitioners. So in that, Geshe gave just a brief introduction to the nature of compassion, but still Geshe said that it's pretty awkward to do it in this way without having developed that in his own mind. Geshe said that his practice of compassion is still meager, so it's awkward to speak about compassion while not having developed that adequate sense of compassion. But anyway, this is the nature of compassion. So looking at the text itself, mind training like the rays of the text. For those of you who are using the printed book, what page is it? 72? 72. Thank you. So meditation on compassion begins with Namkapa saying, now I shall explain the benefits of meditation on great compassion. Repeated contemplation of which will increase your delight in it. Would you like to have a copy of the book, or you're all right? You're right with the screen? We have free copies. I mean, free copies in a sense that you need to leave them at the Gompa. It's not completely free. It's free for an hour. Rent free.
Kanshirtini Gaviloto Punzonde, Sabentin, Bellachunda Urin, Lonjonella, Pumbatavan, Tishetagi, Tomani, Stover Keys, or Congretion was that Omanjubin Gotelia.
So it's in page 72. So here the author says the supplement to Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle way says, because this alone is the excellent crop of the conquerors, the propagated seed and the water that sustains it. And the fully ripened fruit at the time of harvest, I first pay tribute to great compassion.
Tereda, Omanjubo songing, Pandandawa Tapa in Banata, and mid namju put chonding, Tanganza Shamba Pig, Gasep Havata, Sangere, the Chig Mashiva in a ya, some Matuva in a ya, me nani, that mid namju put chonch, the Lotonta Roser Dania, Tanda in attack, Pandan Dawa Traffic, Son Jeondi, and it got to ten dugita, Namjuta, and it Pigita, Purtuchong and Soy by Naya, Han San Degi, Kamison Ding, Mid Namchuchin Tia, and it Yenji di Kitchen Bushu, Jilia, Ziadi, got Nanga Jimena, the Sigameva, that Tachi Chogros. In the Dindi Tolia, the Zubi, Namjujin to Zubi, Nanga Saw Shujin song de Telia, and Sosudes Chitonachi, Nyamshuchi, Sound Tambaina, and Dela Nengach Yoris, Yasijatamba Yoris.
This quotation taken from the supplement to the Milway is taken from a text that was composed by an Indian scholar called Chandakirti, right? So it is a supplement to Nagarjuna's treatise on the Milway, and it was composed by Chandakirti, who was regarded to be one of those foremost scholars, such an amazing scholar, such an intelligent scholar that has arisen many centuries ago in India. From a Buddhist perspective, we might consider Chandakirti to be an Arya Bodhisattva or to be a Buddha, but even if you don't think about Chandakirti in this way, you can still appreciate Chandakirti to be one of those amazing scholars, amazing beings, this amazingly intelligent person that existed once upon a time in India, and in which and in his commentary to Nagarjuna's treatise on the Milway, the commentary is called the Supplement to the Milway, he emphasized the importance of compassion. So in pointing it out to us to be so important, Geshe feels that we can then look at what Chandakirti said, this great being, to study what he said, to think about what he says, to reflect about it, what he said, in order to see if we can appreciate the importance of compassion as stated by Chandakirti.
Pigita, Soundlotan, Ripatan of the shoe, Tindi, and it paid to so in the ninja shoe, Tindi, Nanzuta, Riglam Shion, the Jetayanda, Sigura, Jetayanda Shion, the Tumbilaya Cargos, 단단 간주 출려야 주 출려야 땡땡인기 차팅인도스 추자 추자디 에 가드는 추길 대고 먹고 남칼은 풀고스 남칼아 꼬라지니 아니 추자든 풀대고 여바나 디 사자들이야 추여바디 야자야레스 추자레니 추시 추 추포트고도스 대난신기 비 도와 용데서 사자지 여바나 도와디 규 멜데니 중구 여바 트로메바인자 아니 도와 용사들이야 드로니 메세바나 메라투그레스 오 딘디송을 대난신기 보고르스라 데디 페레스 대난신기 Give Tamba, Namju Purtu Chonding, Give Tamba, Jimmy Nimig, Piggy Kitchenbu Song de Tea, Nanga Shuj Yimbadi, Yasi Yatamba love to Gris, in the Dindi Tolia, Sound Tambana, Nanga Jinjutuana, Pentope, Chimbu Yungusaris.
There were quite a few great Indian masters that have developed. First of all, they themselves were really intelligent, like an amazing scholars. And when you look at their writings, you get an appreciation of the way that they thought and also the logical process that they followed. Actually, in Buddhist scripture, when you look at the reasoning that is used by some of the scriptures of those great masters and the way that logic is used. For example, just to illustrate one type of reason, there are different types of reasons that are explained in the Buddhist tradition in the study of reasons and logic. One of them is called correct reason of result. So in this correct reason of result, one text says that just in order to illustrate that, you see sometimes waterfalls or water birds that congregate around body of water, storks and so forth. So you see them hovering around in the sky somewhere. So you can use that in order to infer that down there on the ground there is a source of water. And similarly, you see in the distance smoke billowing from a certain place, and through that you can infer that there is fire in that place. So similarly, when we look at the writings of those great masters and how they emphasize the importance of love and care for others, if you look at those, I will rephrase that. If you look at the writings of the great masters and you look at the key points that they emphasized in their writings, you can then understand the importance of loving kindness and compassion.
Geshe Mugajra, Tani, that Tengi on the sickness, the Tengi on the sickness, Chayantava Dually Jans, Tengi on the sixth round, that the Omanjuva constant marine, Omanjuvi share Tigi, 20 on the Chinada, and it jumped in the Carson or Islandi, and it jumped in the Chanju Samba, Chemambo, Faber Migi was. Jumped in the Chanju Samba, Church Rabdu Sonche, Rabdu Zovakina. Sanji Che Tamji, Langdin and Chiva Lasso, Churchibu Kanshina, the daddy, Ninji Chamber was. But Dindis, the Sanji Dindis song does.
So Chandrakirti said, because this alone is the excellent crop of the conquerors, the propagated seed and the water that sustains it. And the fully ripened fruit at the time of harvest, I first pay tribute to great compassion. So with regard to its practical value, the value of compassion, not just as indicated by Chandrakirti, but also found in the writing of the sutras of the Buddhas, it says the companion of perfect doctrine says, or subduer, or the Buddha. Bodhisattvas do not train in many teachings, or subduer. If they perfectly grasp and accomplish one doctrine, they have enlightenment in the palms of their hands. If you ask, what is that doctrine? It is great compassion. Or subduer, if you have great compassion, you have all doctrines in the palms of your hand. Or subduers, it is similar, for example, to the precious will of a universal monarch around which all other forces gather.
Pelong, Chuchu, the Ninchimo, jumped in the Ninji 첨부 치나 산지 최담지 랑도 치발라 좀 베기난 콜로기 갸비 콜로름 붙이 간도 치버데 봉기 초담지 치우 좀 된데 대진도 장주스 민님보 민지 첨부 간도 치버데 산지 최담지 치소 좀 된데 베기는 속에 온부 치버데 온부 시행는 치번교로 좀 된데 대진도 인치모진 장주스 최 좋은교로 시소소스.
So continuing with the reading of those analogies, emphasizing the importance of great compassion. Or subdue, similarly, whatever the great compassion of a bodhisattva exists, wherever it exists, there also exists the Buddha's doctrine. Or subdue, likewise, wherever the life faculty is present, there also are the sense faculties. Or subdue, thus, if you have great compassion, you will acquire all the other qualities of a bodhisattva.
어디다 다 대산 비출니스 다더니 닌지 곰 닌지 티스다 삼바움 곰바 출니스 다 주기 렘바다 네기 렘바스 다 닌지 코랑 옹 가르레스 라운디 동아다 태원되바 옹디 동아다 태원되바 다 강 동아다 태원되고 그랬어 라운디 심지어 탐지 동아다 태원되고 그랬어 강 동아다 강동라 그게 있다 율 선르지 동아다 태원되고 그랬어디 심지어 탐지 동아 간르지 태원되고 그랬어디 안다 착당기 왕기 총이다 아니 레닌이 왕기다 동아야 나르수티 어디다 태원되봐 어딘지 삼바디다 공고레스
That brings us to the section that explains the meditation on compassion. So this compassion meditation has two parts. First, of taking sufferings on the inhabitants of this world or the environments, and then taking unsatisfactoriness from the environment which beings inhabit. So with the development of compassion, compassion is the wish for freedom from suffering, the wish for others to be free from suffering. So who are we wishing that for? We wish that to all sentient beings. Sentient beings are the object of our compassion. What we wish for them is to be free from suffering, which originates and depends upon actions and the afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and so forth that motivates those actions, which means that with the development of compassion, we wish sentient beings to be free from suffering that is attributed to karma and afflictions.
강기 동아다 차원데 강도 동아다 차원데세 어디숨 샤오다 강기 강도 강라도지 강 동아다 차원데스나 심자 탐지 동아다 차원데 그래서 강기 동아다 차와 랑기 심자 탐지 동아다 차와 강도 비다 동아기 옹자네 대단 차원데 봐 어딘지지 상당고 그래서
Kangi sena de rangi dobaro.
Kangi su dunga da tawan degres su ra chebo botela kogo.
So then this point is important when we discuss the development of compassion, right? So there are certain points that can be made with respect to it. To begin with, who are we wishing it for? Who wishes for sentient beings to be free from suffering, and what is the nature of suffering that we wish sentient beings to be free from, right? So we develop compassion towards sentient beings. We want sentient beings to be free from suffering. And we want sentient beings to be free from suffering that have a particular nature, suffering that arises from karma and afflictions.
Terda dangi shon de shizon chini 다 슈고르다 니 숑데 셰고건자 숑데 시종진의 슈고르스 숑데 시종진의 숑디 아니 치 수수 로컬이야 삼만섬 땡땡 용거레스 개지 수수 로컬이야 삼부 메바이나 피디 아니 견드 마임바 아니 내가 지 수수라야 디 삼부 문도 삼성 삼로 딘디지 땅투바나 아니 로데야 용야기 개바요스레스.
So Geshe is giving this explanation based on scriptures. So when we follow such an explanation that is based on scripture, not all points might fit in our mind. It's not that everything is going to be, that we're going to agree clearly with everything that is being stated. So Geshe reckons that in general, an approach to studying something like that would be that when you encounter a point that you cannot really fit in your mind, you cannot really get your head around, rather than thinking that, therefore, this text is faulty, there is a problem with the text, you can think about it like, for the time being, like, I can't really get my head around this point. I will leave it here like that, but not think that I need to develop this critical approach towards the text.
수술이야 말을 제대로 누구 쉬우지 제대로 지만나 디야 다 공로다 마가와 기라 당아주 레 담보발이야 다 딘디 갑질이야 다 밑에 비기 동안데 쳤다 거슬라나 덴덴 로라 마숑아 딘디 용거라다 디 용야 가려다 처음에 이렇게 식도 상서 딘디 용식으로 왔어 이제 디 갑려야 아니 저 비기 다 인지 공사만도지 비기 콘트쇼 사대 콘트 거랑 공을야 제주제니 아니 어두 지금 들어봐야나 아니 가법 팁 수수 셈이야 팁 핸도치에 용그라스 디 야셔자다 디 용그라스로.
So just in order to illustrate that point, when we develop compassion, it is said that we need to develop the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Without any sense of partiality, we want to wish everyone to be free from suffering. But still, in life, we encounter certain situations. Someone might be a bully, right? They're bullying you. They're causing you problems. They're harming you. And particularly for us as beginners, we develop a sense of anger or hostility. We develop a sense of dislike to that person. So we might be thinking that although these scriptures teach us to develop an impartial sense of compassion to all sentient beings, it is extremely difficult to do it for the person that is abusing me. It doesn't make sense to me. So those thoughts inevitably arise in our mind. Now, not everything for the time being would make complete sense to us in a practical way, but still we can think of, for example, in a certain situation when someone is causing us problems, when someone is harming us and so forth, if they're doing it motivated by anger, for example, then we can think of what is the nature of anger. The person is doing it because of anger, then what is the nature of anger that is present in their mind? So if you think about it like that, Geshe feels that it will be helpful, will be beneficial in terms of thinking of certain situations and finding it difficult to develop compassion to others.
어디체 온디게 다드라다 닝게 아니 두시 토니다 아니 콘로디 용구여러스 인자 다다 닝세디 콘 두시 칸르지 바이나야 규위란시 진진자 다다 닝데 콘 두시 나로 두고한자 콘 규위란시 진지레스 데린 다 마가와 두자 쇼진 바이나야 산이 닝라 큐리아기 야자야다 큐르시고레스 야 데린 니 참부 쇼진 바이나야 데르곤다 아니 달라 준드레 딘자 이든 싸우니 메바인자 다르선 문도베기데 로디 딘디기 싸운다바이나 마시야기 다 고급요레스 로 어딘디 싸운다 데니 어두스네 림베두스네 다 닌지 톨이야 로 심자 탐지 동안데 타나 제마로 냠비 로지에 톨이야 베즈 간지 간니 토니 삼로다는 수술의 펜번도 딘디 삼다니 아니 로고여서레스
So this is particularly difficult for us. When anger arises in our mind, we find those situations where for the time being, when someone is harming us, we become angry. After all, looking at the type of relationships that we have with others, we divide others, we classify others into those that we like and those that we dislike. We have enemies and we have friends. We have enemies and we have those who are close to our hearts. But still, when we consider those that we dislike, enemies, and those who are close to our hearts, our friends, they are what we call compounded phenomena. As compounded phenomena, they are subject to change, which means that friends change and enemies also change. Someone is your enemy today, but because they're subject to change, it is not unlikely that tomorrow there will be someone that is close to your heart. And someone is being very close to your heart today, but because also they are in the nature of change, it is not impossible that tomorrow or after that they will become one of your enemies. And still, when we look at the way that we relate to friends and enemies, we hold them with it kind of in thinking that there's something that is reliable in them. But friends and enemies, that way of existing as friends or enemies is not reliable. Although it is not reliable, there's nothing to depend upon, still vehemently we hold on to someone being our enemy, and we develop a sense of animosity or anger towards them. So then when we think about how we often refer to friends and enemy with kind of having that vehement sense of resentment, for example, towards an enemy, but still then started to think that that situation is subject to change, those relationships change, then Geshe feels that the mind can become more at ease. We can soften or relax our mind and then start to think of great compassion that is extended to all living beings, friends and enemies included. May all of them be free from suffering.
그래서 단인지 하나지 공고르스라 단인지디 다 검수지다 만부쇼지 용거다 이내야 주다 동ling 토네 단인지 검단 송고도스 니나마야 동ling 님부 빼마장 렘비 코르라니 점 세데티 안 자와드 로종 자와드 테레스.
So here we take up the meditation on compassion. Now, there are different ways of meditating on compassion. And here this text explains how to meditate on compassion as part of the practice of taking and giving, or in Tibetan Tonglen. So here we're going to look at a section that explains taking suffering from inhabitants as a way of developing compassion. And under this title, it says, the text says, this refers to the 7-point mind training, which says giving and taking should be practiced alternately. And you should begin by taking from yourself.
Sheng dungardi and Tsuzu to Tsuleak, the de ten lu tone, then the Musung on the Susudi coach in the military, the Migi Dunga Tsulen, Susul to Geshe Siki Yomaros, in a lu tone to Santana. And it should time jig with Zawadi similar to the Yovanza, same good tone didn't dig any John Derji Yobaina, any Tigi and Suzulia digit.
So we here, according to the 7-point mind training, we alternate in our meditation on giving and taking. Giving and taking should be practiced alternately. So when it says alternating, at least in Tibetan, there's this meaning that you can get as exchanging your attitude, changing your attitude. We change the way that we think in our mind training. Well, we change the way that we think in thinking that we are giving away a happiness and well-being to others, and we take upon ourselves their suffering and the cause of suffering. So this training, this way of thinking, is something that we train in our mind rather than doing it in a practical way. It's not that practically we're going to give away we're giving away a happiness and well-being, and we are taking upon ourselves the suffering of others. We are training our mind in doing so. And if we train our mind in doing so, then that would be a way of developing happiness and well-being for ourselves.
로이 딘디기 배 찬염 따야기로 아니 로이 공부지겨 봐나 디톱기 아니 류디야 대부지 용야지 송구요레스 랑한주 신내세다 배 아니 당한 사물로 배 지침부 슈즈데 배는 신내 드비 갑둘이야 아니 샘피 미벌이야 지지도 네비기 아니 또기 아니 류라야 찬냠비기 아니 류신장기 아니 규규리 롱세디 류라야 캬브그레스 뭐 딘디송다스 라 류신장기 아니 규규리 롱디 류라야 캬원디 류다 하장기 아니 양부당 데부딘디기 다 무스타코 양부 차도고는 간시되네야 아니 안주 추로라야 류 양부 데부 용야지 Geshe yadama yunguya sares. Ro dinza ani di tonda lusamniga pakpebu chi yongya di zu sem ton samdanda ton legi yobata nambi shongla yata di shegoras.
So through that form of meditation, we develop a balanced state of mind. The mind becomes equal of balance in considering the sameness of sentient beings. And it is similar in some sense to, sorry, before we get to that, in the sense of balance that we develop in our mind also affects our body in a way that is similar to the practice of calm abiding or shine in Tibetan. So this meditation practice called calm abiding is a meditation in which we develop a single pointed focus on a particular object. So we develop concentration, a single pointed concentration focusing on a particular object. And through that, and this is what we do with our mind, but it also affects the body in that when our mind becomes when the mind has that single pointed focus, also the wind energy in our body becomes pliant. Our body becomes pliant due to the wind energy completely pervading the body. And this is explained in a particular way in scripture. It is said that thereby when the wind energy becomes balanced all over the body, that kind of it prevails all over the body, then your body is become light and pliant. Whether or not we should take it literally, in that kind of you're going to lose weight in that sense from practicing calm abiding, Geshe is not true, but it says that so Geshe said that it's not sure whether the body is going to become really light, but at least there's this sensation of lightness that pervades the body when this wind energy pervades the body. So this is done through taking up mental training, right? So similarly here, when we train in giving and taking, it is a training in a way of thinking.
Terda di nengaro di kazengalia danzing kolia keji tison danzin tianji challenge titiwere ngadi tsigdanga mara danzin.
So you ask us like question about dancing. Can you ask it? Okay.
Yeah.
That's all. Okay, so Venerable Kadra is also training in Tibetan. Asked Geshe a question a couple of days ago. So we had lunar eclipse, and it is said that certain practices become magnified. The accumulation of merit and so forth becomes magnified during lunar eclipse. Like Sanskrit says that you accumulate merit or virtue like hundreds times, thousands times greater than normal days. So Kadra was working if that's true. How does it work?
만주기 단진디 다와 찬상 통위 니모데마도 연구요 말했어. 다와 찬상 통위 니모 딘디질이야 다 까고래야 단진 키도스. 세버 정아질마도 다 단진디 요 말했어. 다 세버 정아디 아니 다와 용스 통야게 아니 니모지 차고 그랬어. 다 다와 용스 통야게 니모델이야 아니 치긴 종아디 하장기 찬양무지 치긴 종아 사치 멜롱기 종이기 니바저라스 디 찬양비기 뒤즈질이야 야지야다면 키기여서리스.
So the way that Geshe thinks about such statements, that during those events where you have lunar eclipse and so forth, the accumulation of merit and such becomes so much more powerful. Well, Geshe says that looking at the Tibetan calendar, lunar eclipses occur during occasions when we have full moon, the 15th of the Tibetan month in the Tibetan calendar. So in those days, Geshe says that certainly the way that he thinks about it is that there is balance in the external elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, particularly are said to be in a balanced state.
Lugun John Chanyawandi, and Sanga Lamegi Chushawandi, and it seemed so long la dengris. Long, touching shinto pig, touch, and a Chanyam big, long the Lula Kawandi, and it seemed the Siu Chach. In the D tone, same Siu Chow tone, and it getting balance Havana, gave a shook shit dredge. Diva Javana, Diva shook shit dredge. The patient didn't know.
So they said that during those days, the external elements are more balanced. So there's more balance in the external elements, and also they influence the internal elements that we have in our body. So we have the external elements, and then we have the internal elements inside the body. Particularly when you look at that from the perspective of High Yoga Tantra section of one section of the Buddhist practices that we take up, then in High Yoga Tantra, it is said that our mind depends upon the element of wind. And when the wind pervades all the body in an equal way, there is a greater mental clarity that is elicited. And therefore, with that greater degree of mental clarity, if you get involved with practices of cultivating virtue and abandoning or ridding yourself of negativities, then this whole practice becomes much stronger than normally.
Right. Things on Zugi, Lugitza Tamji level to the Yoba. And it Sagi Tony, Zokar Chak, Tian Long. And it that tea Tobi, some Lokazutama Tsugi, tea long drawn the shook children. And it's Sagananga long drawn shook children, the lever di, levi zadi long count, the lever gear, lever children said the lever gear, some big things in gomnenzula leba mang do sedi o dindri redos dindri doji redosana dindri doji chagwasares dinza ani sam da long nimbola ya dewa shuchi o di tichik songo dos da dinge
Semtan long game
sam da long
long.
da luida dewa ye barwata
Geshe reckons that if you then think about it from a scientific perspective, certainly you can find some similarities in that. Probably from the point of view of medical science, Geshe reckons that looking at the function of brains, the function of brain, and also the system of channels, neurons and blood vessels and so forth that run from the brain all the way to our body, right? The different, for example, we'll look at a neurological system and how it is connected to the brain. Then when there is an excessive or a particular brain activity, it will also influence other parts of our body. So in that sense, Geshe reckons that those that conduct research on the brain, neuroscience or what have you, can see different correlations between certain mental activities and certain areas in the brain that are being fired that show certain activity or development in the brain. So sometimes we speak about the brain developing. So rather than thinking of kind of the brain is becoming bigger and bigger, it's more like the neurological system is developing in the brain when certain thinking activity or cognitive processes are active. Anyway, here Geshe says that we can explain that also through looking at the system of mind and the wind energy that the mind depends upon.
아니 짜들이야 짜릭 마부 쇼치 간주 류 짜디 개첨부 쇼치 찌여레 디나게 짜릭 마부 짜카시 되착 짜 샤당게 짜 디무 짜 딘리에 쇼나라야 타니자기도스 다 두주 아니 다레 짜람 짜 지그토니 아니 베나 롱종 지온디 아니 되잘레 대야라 소바다 짜 지그토니 롱종 지온디 샤당 레디 딘디기 다지 롱 라바다 요마데네 딘디 소르지 son yores da didan tensan tseri bi leba tagji chingin shedan di draw shu chagores draw pe chagores.
When you look at that system as explained in Buddhist scriptures, there is an explanation of the makeup of the body and then the different channels that you find in the body. Some of them are called energy channels. So some of the channels are giving the terms anger, attachment, ignorance, and so forth. In some sense, we can consider them as pathways for the movement of this wind energy that is attributed sometimes to anger, to attachment, and so forth. This is some of the description that you find in Buddhist scriptures. It says that, for example, when such and such wind moves along this energy channel, then anger arises or attachment arises and so forth. So wind, when we speak about the wind energy moving along this channel, of course, we're not speaking about something that is coarse. It's not coarse wind. But anyway, this is the mode of explanation. Geshe reckons that when you find correlations between this explanation and the way that it is explained in science or neuroscience, Geshe feels that you will find a lot of similarities.
다 레벨 짜기 내가 제고나 탑시 가르스니 삼로 땅야디 라 가츠스기 비기 다지 로딤니 삼로 땅토가 디츠기 레벨 짜기 내가 제고레스 라.
So we have many channels, neurons and such that exist in our brain, but it's not that we make use of all of them. The way to make use of them, to make them operate often is through thinking, through developing a certain way of thinking.
There's some doing to lebadi tam manchishi ta piji yo mars the jaja jadam seri will lagoras the DJ kinds of consuming some down to namju the medi leba giagi the gugendi gain the tegoma dindi the domro jabana dindi those reshas.
Then we have other living beings, animals and so forth with different brain structures. So not being intelligent enough, they cannot really utilize the brain in a way that we can. So therefore, their brain system or the neuron system and so forth cannot be developed in the way that we develop them.
There's the ninji dang, sherab dang, chamba dang, kanji, any look kuyambi, any low rig delia, kazu, siki, samlo dang to a tea tsugi, any lugin, joint chanyamya, and lu dewuya, sem dewuya, the shemogoba, tea tonnet, any the pendidriagi, the gayon son sandiach, Namasanji vision, the ninja sungus.
Anyway, here we're looking at the development of loving kindness and compassion and wisdom. And through that, our mind is becoming more relaxed. It has an effect not only over the mind, but also our body become more relaxed. There's this greater sense of balance that our body and mind experience, and wellness is accomplished through that, which means that we provide the full set of cause and conditions for that wellness to occur. So we leave the text here for today. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you're welcome to bring them up. If not, we can just leave it here for now. So have you got any questions? So is it always a wrong view to not agree with the certain teachings that you hear or practice that you hear about? Yeah. Dila, 맞아 춘년도로 내가시 켈말렘바 양 야마나디 냠nen치 양 줍다 직대오이나 디라 참아 켈레마 투바디 디참아 록다 차기르베스
켈레마 투바 정도 록다 차기 말했어.
Simply not being able to accept something doesn't make it a wrong view.
록다스나 매바 타지도 매바 타지야. 아니 임바지 타지도 마임바 타지야. 사운드 디기들이야. 록다스기도 왔어.
So more specifically, when we speak of wrong views, we refer to certain way of thinking in which you deny the existence of something that does exist, or you take something that does not exist and claim that it exists in an actual fact. So wrong views, more strictly speaking, is either denying existence or claiming that something that doesn't exist exists. This is a wrong view. So therefore, simply not being able to accept something or to agree with something does not make it a wrong view.
태점 세반다 저당다 태점다 비 직치디다 먹어야지 이내 안주다 안주 레 담보 안주 장거라서 마신 장거 잠비 갑들이야 태점 여봐나 디 펜토야 차겐라야 로르스다 안주 겐도 쇼송사레스 쇼송사레스.
So here comes doubt. So doubt is something that you can say, in some sense, you can say we don't need to have doubt, but actually for us, doubt is a necessary part of developing our mind. So we raise doubts, and through doubt, we develop knowledge. Geshe's teacher kind of emphasized so much the importance of having doubts. Thank you. So we will finish with making some dedication prayers. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that is not arisen and rise and grow, and may that which is arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. O powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain till samsara ends. Savior of the snow-land teachings and transmigrated beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Last one. You uphold the subduous moral way yourselves in the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majuna's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Sever of myself and as your disciples, please live long.